Hello, it is Thursday afternoon and I am about to head to an appointment with a new physical therapist, and she's going to basically be doing an evaluation to see if I might have any kind of hypermobility. This is something that my naturopath recommended, mostly just because we're always looking for any little clues as to where some of my symptoms are coming from and kind of dealing with chronic pain. The idea with hypermobility is there are actually genetic conditions where you can have hypermobile ligaments and tendons, and then that can cause all sorts of issues, but definitely pain being one of them because your muscles and fascia will tighten up trying to do the job of the ligaments and tendons that they're not really doing in terms of like holding things in place. It can come with some like chronic pain issues. It's like basically you can be super hypermobile and have too much mobility, but you feel like you have tension all the time. I wouldn't say that's the case for me, but I have had a fair amount of like chronic pain that comes and goes, but have had that really for the whole time that I've been dealing with this chronic fatigue. And really actually since I was a child, I had a lot of tension headaches. I had some other pain issues that were somewhat managed, but never really could figure out what the root cause was. So anyway, I don't know that I or my naturopath think that this is like a huge problem for me, but it could again be sort of a clue. But the other piece of it is that it's kind of a neurological factor where having this hypermobility can mean that maybe like your brain is just not communicating correctly, quote unquote, to your body. And so you're having physical issues, but can also then trickle down to having other sort of brain to body connection issues that could be like hormonal issues or just signaling issues. And in her experience, my naturopath, when she's had other clients with similar situations to me that have also been hypermobile, when they've gotten some of that under control through doing specific physical therapy exercises, other symptoms have improved as well, as it kind of like rewires that brain to body connection. So in any case, it's good to go kind of check this box, check it out, see what this therapist thinks and whether there's any information there or anything that I can do that might be helpful. I have in the past had some other body workers that I've worked with who sort of suspected hypermobility for me, and I wouldn't be surprised. I think it might run in my family a little bit. Whether that relates to everything else that's going on for me in terms of my health symptoms, I'm not sure, but that's why we go to somebody who's an expert in this to get the evaluation and see where we go from here. So I'm not sure if they'll let me take any video in there. Otherwise, I'll give an update when I get back. And then also on Monday, I'm going to be meeting with my naturopath again to go over my heavy metals test results. Did get those back. I will also share those with you later because it's not great, but it's also kind of interesting because it is different than it was before. I'm not sure if it's in a good way or not, but definitely were some results that came up in there that were not in the normal range. So we'll go over those, or I'll share what I have so far. And then on Monday, we'll be doing like a deep dive with my naturopath on what those results mean and what we need to do about it. Okay, so next day, I did not really get any footage from the physical therapist, but it pretty much went as I expected. It was a very sort of basic range of motion type of testing, and what she determined was that I do have some signs of hypermobility. I checked some of the boxes, but nothing that's like super extreme or really concerning. And kind of in the end, it sounded like even if you were to have a diagnosis of like a genetic condition or like extreme hypermobility, the treatment process is essentially the same. You sort of treat the symptoms, you try some physical therapy exercises to gain more stability, and you see what works. So given that I do have some chronic pain and like a few little things that tend to be more reoccurring that could be related to some stability issues, I'm going to see her a few more times to do a little bit of like pelvic floor therapy and just sort of testing and checking some things, seeing if her giving me some exercises that I can do for like deep core work and just trying to create a little bit more stability in certain areas. It helped me feel a little more stable, might reduce some of the chronic pain or some of the areas that get more sort of tight feeling, even when I don't have any real restrictions in those areas. So I think this, along with some of the other things that I'm doing, it'll be a good addition in terms of like getting some actual, maybe some things that I can do during my workouts or as part of my warm-ups to create a little more stability and just kind of see if that helps sort of bring everything together and give me a little bit of improvement with some of the recurring like pain and tension that I tend to have. But I did want to also share my heavy metals test results because I got those back earlier this week. I'm meeting with my naturopath on Monday. Today is Friday. So we will be going over these in depth on Monday, and she'll be giving me her ideas of what we need to address or how we might go about this. But I did find the test results quite interesting. I have one of my old results from a couple of years ago to compare to the results that I got now. So from previous year, I have the provoked heavy metals testing. Again, I did an unprovoked test and a provoked heavy metals test. So the unprovoked test is simply a urine test where it's basically testing what is your body getting rid of right now? Are there heavy metals that are being excreted? Basically, like, are you being exposed in your daily life right now? And then you do a provoked test where you take a binding agent which can pull heavy metals out of your soft tissues or your bones where it can get stored in your body if you've been like accumulating it for a long time. So if you don't find anything on the unprovoked test, you might think you have no problems with heavy metals. And that was kind of what came up the first time I ever did this testing, was like not a lot showed up on the unprovoked test. But when I take a chelating agent that binds to heavy metals that's stored in your body, then I had a few things that really showed up super high and things that were definitely concerning, like lead and mercury. So if you look at my previous heavy metals testing from, let's see when this was, doesn't say the date, but it says I was 34, so that would be 3 to 4 years ago at this point. So on this test, you could see this was the provoked testing. The lead and mercury are all the way in the red, as is the thallium. There are a few other things on there that are maybe like a little bit into the yellow, but possibly not as concerning. Obviously, is having that amount of lead and mercury and thallium not a great sign. The thallium is kind of an interesting one because I'm not entirely sure where that comes from, but from what I remember, that seems to be more prominent now in some foods that you can be getting thallium levels, like from vegetables and stuff. It gets pulled in from the soil into vegetables, and then you eat it and you get it yourself. So that one's kind of maybe a little bit more easy to explain. The lead and mercury is kind of strange because, again, it doesn't seem to show up on my unprovoked testing. So it doesn't seem like I'm like ingesting it now or getting it from my environment currently. But when we bind to it and pull it out, it seems like it's more stored in my body, and it's clearly at very high levels. How I would get that amount of lead and mercury stored in my body over time, I don't know. We haven't really been able to figure out a possible source of that or how I might have been exposed. So this is my old heavy metals test. Now we go on to the ones I just did a couple of weeks ago. Here's the unprovoked test from a couple of weeks ago. You can see again, there's a few things that are high or kind of in the yellow to red. I don't know what palladium is. No idea. That's obviously a new one. It was not on the previous testing. Not sure why that's in the red, where that comes from. Also barium, that's a new one. That was not on the previous test either. And then again, the thallium is there, but it's a lot less than it was before. Okay, so that's the unprovoked testing. That is presumably what I'm just excreting out on a day-to-day basis, or maybe getting just from food or environmental factors. Then we look at my provoked testing from a couple of weeks ago, and now we got a whole bunch of things that are pretty far up there. Obviously, the things that showed up on the unprovoked testing tend to show up again, or maybe a little bit more on the provoked testing, where you're sort of pulling out any extra stuff that's stored in the body. So the barium is still there, the thallium's a little bit higher, the palladium, whatever it is way high. Interestingly, the lead and mercury are still high, but they're more in the yellow zone compared to a couple of years ago where they're in the red. I'm going to take that as a win, because if I've got less lead and mercury in my body, that's got to be a good thing. And I'm wondering if that might be because of my consistent sauna use and some of the other detox support that I've been doing really consistently for quite a while now. But it still seems like having this amount of heavy metals stored in my body, or basically hidden somewhere in my body, probably not helping me in terms of my health issues or chronic fatigue and hormone issues and all this stuff. I would have to imagine that this is playing a part in what is sort of keeping me from being able to make a lot of progress with all of the other things that I'm doing. If these heavy metals are still in my body, that even doing a whole bunch of other things that might be helpful for like gut healing or might be helpful for nervous system regulation, it's only gonna go so far if this stuff is sort of constantly depleting my system and putting a strain on my body. As I mentioned before, one of the issues with heavy metals is that they are very hard to get rid of. And some of the ways that you can do it, like using these binding agents, are pretty intense on the body and can be like really hard to handle over time. And there comes a point where like if you're putting more stress on your body to try to get rid of something like this, it might not actually be the best option. At the same time, we really do want to try to get rid of these or get these numbers to be at a more reasonable level. So we'll be really interested to see what my naturopath has to say and how we want to move forward with this. Again, I'm really glad to see that the lead and mercury is a little bit lower than it was before, but some of these other ones that are now showing up on there are kind of mysterious to me. I don't really know why those would be there, where they would be coming from. Given that some of these metals that are showing up now were not present previously, does that mean that something in my environment or my lifestyle changed that is impacting that? Is it just that I've been doing more of this detox stuff and maybe it's like starting to get pulled out and therefore it's showing up on these tests? Not totally sure. So those are my heavy metals results, or just kind of the preliminary results that I have now. We'll have a lot more information once I talk with my doctor on Monday, and we'll give you guys another update then.
Until we get more clarity around where the palladium and even the cesium for that matter are coming from, I'm a little bit hesitant to like go down any major like road of like, oh, we've got to remove that. It's kind of like, all right, well, sure, it seems like a good idea, but I think we just need to learn more information first.
Yeah.
The thing I can possibly think of is that it was in one of the
metal things.
Because it's not something like thallium supposedly exists like in the Earth's layers of like the crust. Yeah. Part of why we think it's getting into the food supply, water or whatever is kind of being pulled up from that. And then that's getting distributed to crops, and that's how it's contaminating foods. You know, why the palladium would still be there when you've had the implants removed. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I have a lot more to learn about how palladium works in the body, and like when you have implant exposure, like, I will have to ask my colleagues. I mean, so I think the question mark remains, is this a big deal? Do we even need to worry about it? And if we do, then, you know, what's the best way to deal with it? Who knows? For all we know, maybe all the stuff you've been doing is helping to excrete it, which is why your numbers are higher now than they were before. We've got a lot of options. I think what we do first is that, let me message my colleagues first. And then if the message is, yeah, palladium's a concern, yes, get the implants tested, then I'll give you the information for the lab to like contact them and say, hey, here are the implants I have. Can you test these? The cesium is a little bit more like, I don't know. I haven't been able to identify any other sources besides potentially food. And I don't know what to do about that because I don't think it's like something you can just, not eat this food. And it's, I don't know that we have enough data on like our food supply yet. I think it's possible that we just need to continue supporting like general elimination of metals and like trying to keep your gut as healthy as possible.
IV version, is that like, is there a benefit to that? I mean, obviously besides the fact it doesn't go through your gut, but like, is it hard to do? Is it?
It's hard to do. It's not totally inappropriate. It's just that there's higher potential risk once you put it in the veins. Some of the criticisms or some of the discussion around like oral versus IV is that like oral, you tend to grab only what's like in the gut. That's sort of oversimplifying it, but the idea is that you're going in, you're grabbing stuff that's in the gut. The body's like, okay, you take that, and then as it recognizes,
just dumps out more.
It dumps out more. Yep. So some people with heavier burdens might benefit from doing IV.
Do you feel like we're going to have to do something about this at some point? Or is it like focus on other things first and hope that this kind of like...
I mean, you've done quite a lot of the other things. Like, I get your question, because your question's kind of like, are we there yet? Yeah, I think the short answer is we could go there now. I mean, the thing about metals for you that has always been sort of on my mind is like you had a pretty significant burden in the past. The lead and the mercury were my biggest concerns, and I always kind of figured we'd never reach like a point of zero for you. I don't know if IV would make an appreciable difference on that or not. I just don't know. I mean, I think it's worth considering at this point. It is one of the few things that seems to come up pretty consistent. I mean, it's like the only thing.
For years,
Years. Again, I think a lot of the questions about where the metals are coming from is like, I don't know. But the fact that your lead and mercury with that provocation did not go up as high makes me think that there is no longer a current exposure. The people I deal with who had numbers like this, the other people that I work with, they like are literally working with metals. So the mercury is really a little bit of like a, I don't know, that is weird to me. I think it sounds like next steps are if you want to test it out, you could add in something like a modified citrus pectin. The other thing will be, let me check with my colleagues about the palladium. Let me put together like a short list of people for you to maybe look into. In the meantime, we'll also kind of check in about some of the other things we talked about.
Cool.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Okay, it's the next day, so I had my appointment yesterday with my naturopath. We talked all about the heavy metals and kind of what those results mean and what we want to do next. As you heard from our conversation, sometimes these test results really bring up more questions than answers, and it can be a little bit frustrating because, yeah, it's good to know that those heavy metals are there, and it's definitely not a good thing. It's kind of a problem we need to address, but also like, where is it coming from and how do we really target this without potentially doing things that are really hard on my body and going to be even more depleting. I remember when I did my first heavy metals test, like this was many years ago at this point. I think maybe it was 2017 or something like that, the first time I did the heavy metals testing. And I remember when I got the test results back, I was sort of just so relieved and kind of excited because it felt like there was finally a reason, finally an explanation for why I was feeling the way I was and why I wasn't really making progress despite doing so many different things and working so hard to try to support my body and help move the needle. So when I saw those lead and mercury numbers in particular, or just saw that those heavy metal numbers were so high, my initial reaction was like, finally we have something to really target. We have kind of a root cause, and like we'll fix this, we'll get rid of the heavy metals, and then I'm really going to be on my way. Little did I know that it's not that simple, that the detoxification process to get rid of heavy metals is pretty hard, and that even after I did like 2 rounds of really intense detoxification, when we retested, the numbers were better, but they were still high. I still had a lot of the same symptoms. I did see a bit of a reduction in brain fog. I used to have really, really intense brain fog, like debilitating brain fog all the time, and it really did make a difference in that, but the lead and mercury levels were still in the yellow zone even after the detox, and I started becoming allergic to the medication, like I mentioned, so kind of had to stop it a little bit early and haven't really been able to do that intense of a detoxification process again because it's just too hard on my body. This whole time that we've been working on other things like focusing on gut health, focusing on supporting detox pathways in other more gentle ways that just will maybe be more subtle or take a lot more time, both in the hopes that in the long term that will help, even if it takes much longer, but also with the idea that if we can get my body to a better place overall, it might be able to handle more of the detox process, or like a higher strength detox process, and or my body might just start to get better at detoxifying itself, and then some of these like longer, slower methods will be more effective. But this is also where it gets to be really frustrating and kind of overwhelming sometimes, because even like my doctor said, like there's probably no way I'm ever going to get down to 0, considering that these heavy metals are really lodged in my body at this point and have accumulated over time to a point where even if we keep pulling stuff out slowly, it's going to kind of keep leaching out of the areas where it has been stored, and it's just going to be almost impossible to ever get that number completely eliminated. At the same time, I have to think that getting those numbers a lot lower is going to be obviously a lot less of a burden on my body overall and going to help everything else function a little better. So I still feel like doing this work is really important. Like it's going to take a really long time, and it's going to be a really long, slow process, which it already has been. Not to mention that we still don't even know where these heavy metals are coming from or came from. I'm not sure that really matters at this point because they're there and we have to deal with them. But that added level of just like not knowing how this happened or how I got to this point is also weirdly frustrating. Like I think as humans, our brains want to have an explanation for things. And like if I knew, oh yeah, I had some exposure when I was younger or something like that, and that's why this is happening, and that would make it feel easier to deal with, I guess. But having no idea where these numbers have come from also just kind of adds to the overall frustration and kind of sense of helplessness, I guess. In terms of the lead and mercury, my doctor was saying you don't see numbers like that unless it's people that are like working directly with these substances somehow. It's really still really odd to me that that is in my body, and I keep thinking that I'm gonna like wake up in the middle of the night one night and have some revelation about where it came from or how this happened, but so far that has not been the case. Anyway, it is what it is, and we have to just start where I am now and try to move forward in whatever way we can. One of the things we have talked about in the past is doing IV chelation therapy. So previously I did these drugs that you take orally, which work really well, but because it has to go through your gut, it can be kind of hard on your gut. And like I said, you can become allergic to it or kind of develop a reaction to it over time, which is what happened to me. When you do it in an IV basis, obviously you're bypassing the gut, so you can potentially get a stronger response without it affecting your gut health. That said, it's really hard to find people that do this kind of IV chelation therapy. There are obviously more risks involved when you're putting something into your veins, but it's also kind of a cost-benefit ratio at this point of like, if I have these really high heavy metals and I've had them for so long, and we aren't really finding other ways to get rid of them, and we know that we have to get those numbers lower if we really want to be able to make progress, it might now be time to consider going that route, just because there's not a lot of other options. And we sort of put this on hold for a long time, like I said, to focus on other things. But again, it's not having a lot of effect on my symptoms overall, and there comes a point where like this is going to be a factor that keeps me from moving forward unless we deal with it more aggressively. So we still haven't made any like firm decisions on what the next step is. Because the palladium showed up and we're not really sure where that's coming from or whether it is something that we need to be really concerned about, she's going to look a little more into that and kind of consult with some of her colleagues on how serious of an issue that is and where it might be coming from. I might try to get some of the titanium implants that I had both in my jaw and my wrist, get those tested to see if potentially there's substances in there that could be causing some of these levels to be high. We're not really sure that that's a likely route either, but it's just something to consider because palladium has never shown up on my tests before. And the only thing really that's been different in the last couple of years was having had those surgeries, having had titanium implants put in and then removed. So maybe there was some kind of exposure in that process. And then she's going to send me the names of some people that do the IV chelation therapy so that I can kind of look into it and see if it's potentially something that I would want to consider. And in the meantime, we also are looking at doing some additional gut testing, doing some gut healing protocols to deal with some of the things that showed up on my last gut health test, but also retesting with a couple of different labs just to kind of cross-reference and see if anything different shows up, or like kind of make sure that we can really understand how much stock to put in what these tests say, just kind of out of curiosity for ourselves. So we're going to do a little bit of additional gut testing and then kind of do some of these healing protocols and then like retest and kind of see how that plays out. That will likely keep me occupied for a little bit while we dig into the heavy metal situation and try to figure out what those next steps are going to be. But yeah, this is just sometimes where the process can feel really frustrating because it's like I still have all these symptoms on a day-to-day basis. I still feel really tired a lot of the time and I still have pain a lot of the time. My hormones are still kind of in the tank. For so long in this process, especially at the beginning, I thought we were going to find something. We were going to find something like these heavy metals. We were going to find some obvious reason for why I'm feeling this way, and we were going to be able to focus on that thing, and like it was going to be this, upward trajectory towards me feeling better. Now that I'm like 13 years into this, I started seeing my naturopath in February of 2013. So I've been seeing her for almost 13 years, and there probably was like at least a year or two before that where my symptoms were still really bad, but I wasn't really putting it all together. I wasn't focusing on it, or I wasn't really like digging into what was going on and trying to figure out why I was feeling that way. So we're talking like 13 to 15 years of dealing with this. And it's coming to the point now where I'm really realizing that like this might just be my whole life. Like I might be really dealing with or managing this for my whole life. Not to say that it's not going to get better. I always really truly think that I can get better and that things are going to continue to improve. But given that it's taken this long to get from where I was to where I am now, it seems like this is going to be kind of an ongoing, lifelong process. Even if I do get like significantly better, even in the short term, I'm going to have to continue managing this. Like I'm not going to reach some endpoint where I don't have any of these problems anymore, or don't have to do things to keep myself on the right track, etc. And sometimes that in and of itself can feel exhausting to just be like, I'm always going to be dealing with this. And as hard as it is to kind of accept that, I do think that like really embracing that and accepting that is also part of the process and part of the healing journey, and like to both be okay with that, to be okay with where I am right now and with the fact that this might take a really long time or might be ongoing for the rest of my life, and at the same time be really committed to the process and have a lot of hope for the future and have a lot of optimism that there still is a long way that I can go and a lot of improvement that I can see. So I don't know, I've just been thinking a lot about this the last couple of days, this whole process, how long it's been, where I started, what's happening now. It can be a lot sometimes, but I'm really grateful to have such a good team of people that are helping me, to have a lot of support, to have a lot of resources available here and be able to do all of these things. So yeah, I guess just one step at a time, one day at a time. Keep moving forward. In other news, next week is Christmas, so I am leaving. Today is Tuesday. I leave early Thursday morning, going to go ride in South Carolina for a couple of days, and then heading to New York to meet my family, hang out there for Christmas for a couple of days. I have a lot of packing to do, have to be ready for both riding and for Christmas, and as always, trying to really like support my body through the process of travel, to do whatever I can so that I can really enjoy my time away, enjoy my time with my family over the holidays, and not feel super depleted and exhausted, and be ready to get started with some of these next steps or new protocols once I get back. So thank you for watching. Thanks for listening to me ramble on today, and I'll see you guys soon.